Let's see. All right, we're live. Welcome, Pipa, for today's session. Hello.
Hi. Hello, hello.
Hello. How are you doing today?
I am brilliant today. And I mean, this where I am, which is Southwest London, the sun's been shining. I feel like spring is coming. Good things are on the way. So yeah, I'm feeling very positive today.
How is that possible? How can you have sun in London?
I mean, we haven't had it for quite some time, but it's here. It's here.
We haven't had it for 3 years, so now we got yeah.
All good.
No, we had sun today too. We have a super interesting topic today, and it is about Pipa
It's
self-discovery
about
before. Yeah,
self-discovery before
yeah,
product discovery.
and
So,
that
would you
is
like me to go into a little summary of that, or shall I leave it there?
no, yeah. Let's go into the summary and like just introduce the topic because we have here product managers, right? And I think they're trained more towards product discovery. So now like we have this title, self discovery before product discovery. Just explain a little bit what you mean with that. What is it about? What we talk about today?
Yeah. So, I suppose in product, we have so many things to learn. There's so many frameworks, so many different aspects of doing the job. But underlying all of that, the foundation of that is working with people and our connections with people. We can joke that product managers don't really do anything because we're not
Mm,
building products, we're not designing products, yet
mm,
we've got to do a lot of influencing and connecting with people and bringing people together to collaborate around problems. So fundamentally, that people skill is a muscle we should be really focusing on. And if we take a
mm,
step back from that, in order to be able to confidently influence others, we've also got to be
mm,
pretty self-aware of
mm.
who we are and how we behave and how that behavior affects other people.
Interesting. Perfect. So that's topic today. We will have about, I think, 30 minutes to 45 minutes discussion, me and Pippa. And afterwards, we do a Q&A. Yeah, we have, I see around 40 people now in the live stream. You can just type in here on LinkedIn in the comments, and we are able to, show here banners. For of your questions. So while you're listening, I encourage you just type down your thoughts or questions, and we'll just show it here on the screen. Maybe if somebody types in, say hello, I could just show you how the banner looks like. Where are you guys from? 44 people now. Where are you guys from? Just type in something, and I can show you how that works. Okay, Pipa, why do you think it is, like what made you look on self-discovery and think, okay, this is really important. I spent time and energy learning that, adopting that, right? So take me
Mm,
back to the beginning where you started to acknowledge that this is an important topic for you.
yeah. Well, I think I've always been interested in psychology and behavioral psychology, and I did A levels psychology at school, and so I was introduced to some of that thinking, which kind of piqued my interest. And then I went off into university and the real world, and started setting goals and sort of being really ambitious and going after things. And I had this moment after I got married and bought my first house and had my first child, where I found myself really unhappy. And I mean, technically, I suppose it was postnatal depression, but I think it was a culmination of so much more than that, which was I had set goals and sort of blindly thought, I'm going to go and just achieve these things and that will be satisfying and fulfilling. And having achieved those things, suddenly felt a bit lost on who I was. And it was actually going through the process of therapy because of the postnatal depression. I sat opposite this qualified therapist who helped hold space for me and helped in a non-judgmental way pick through who I was and help me understand who I was better. And that kind of really triggered wanting to learn more about psychology, but also learn more about self-development and all of these things. If I rewind a bit before that, I had done a course when I was working at British Gas. They did a leadership course where they talked about values, but they also talked about really setting behaviours of how you want to be and what kind of things do you care about. And it was in the back of my mind, and then going through this process of therapy sort of made me go, oh, hang on a second, maybe I could learn a bit more about that. Maybe I could bring this in. And then it sort of snowballed from there, really, in understanding myself and my behaviors and really sort of bringing myself some self-awareness. I was able to think, okay, so what do I care about? Why am I doing these things? What inspires me? What motivates me? And what I've realized in going through that process of that motivation, I realized that when I identified my values and started exploring about how to live in line with them, I started doing better at work. I started connecting better with people. I was able to start being little less judgmental, shall we say. I mean, that's been a process, and we were talking a little bit about that before. And I'm really noticing that when I entered into, let's take an example of like a stakeholder relationship where there might be some sort of conflict that we're trying to sort out. If I go into that generously, listening and holding space for them to sort of air all their concerns and really put myself in their shoes, suddenly there was this, we kind of moved forward and made progress and collaborated better. And I noticed the relationships I built were better. And from there, it just kind of took off. And then that led me to sort of want to learn more and more and more. And that's kind of led me to where I am today, really.
Interesting. I mean, there's so many, different direction we could go with this this conversation. Like two things stood out for me. You took like 2 or 3 times the word judgmental, right? Not being, like judgmental towards other people, in a meeting, or somebody helped you without being judgmental. Help me understand, why is this aspect so important?
So I think when we think about what stops us doing something, a lot of people say I'm worried about what other people think. There's a fear around what judgments people are going to hold of me. I've actually been doing some calls recently, focused on women, focusing on confidence and building up their confidence. And there's this theme every time of, and this has come up 4 times in 2 days, of I get into a stakeholder meeting and I feel really confident when I'm working with my squad and I'm on a peer-to-peer relationship. But as soon as I get into a stakeholder meeting where there may be more senior stakeholders, I don't know what to say. I don't know how to be confident in that moment. And the phrase that gets used a lot is, oh, I have imposter syndrome. Well, let's strip that back. What's the fear underneath that? The fear is a judgment fear. I'm scared of being judged by someone else. And when you sit with someone who you trust and you don't feel is judging you, you feel safer. And this is where we sort of border into psychological safety. We're able to offer more ideas and maybe be more creative and try things out and learn and grow. And that judgment piece, whether it be true or one a story we have created in our heads, it can really hold us back.
Okay, so it's more or less like really be confident and feel safe to express your opinion and talk openly. And there was another really, really interesting aspect. You said like, okay, I want to work on something which is important for me. I think, like the discussion with Gen Z or Gen Z, whatever you want to call it, it's like, it's always like said lately, like, okay, they only want to have the fun part, and it's really important for them to work on something important, right? I think it's good actually that you work on something important. If like if nobody cares about the product they build, I mean, there's will be no good product. Or what is like the aspect you see in that? Like, what did it make with you when you work on something which is important for you versus something which is not so important for you? Like, what did you like, if you reflect on yourself, like what did it change for you?
So I think when we're talking about importance, naturally we start kind of going into why is it important. So when I'm coaching someone, I'm often sort of say, why did you want to do product? Why this? If it's about earning money, there's lots of different ways to earn money. So what is it about this that sort of inspires you or motivates you in some way? Now, when I think of what's important to me, it might not necessarily be the product or the industry or the company, but maybe it's around, well, actually, I've got a vision of where I want to go in the longer term, and this opportunity is going to help me learn a new skill or practice something. So again, if I think back to some of that reflection time and what is important to me, creating cultures where people feel safe because of this non-judgmental thing is important to me. So that has driven me in, where am I going to be most effective at creating those spaces? Well, leadership is a really good way of holding space for someone, because you can set an example of how you want the culture to be. Similarly with coaching, and that takes up a lot of what I do now. I want to help others on an individual basis create that space so that they can feel that they can try things out and grow. So it can take different forms. It doesn't have to be, I'm going to work on this product because this product is important to me. It might be, that might be totally in line with your purpose. If you want to focus on, if sustainability is important and sort of environmental issues, maybe that's your motivator. Maybe that's going to be what's going to keep you working in line with what's important to you and what's your value or your values. It can come in lots of different forms, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say.
What was the outcome for you, right? So if you see like people before this experience and afterwards, like what did it give you? Like, what was the difference? Like, how did it feel? Like, whoa, how can you describe that to somebody, not having this experience yet?
So I'm not going to pretend like, oh, I'm a perfect person now and I just glide through life. That very much isn't the case. But I think what it did for me is what I would say before. I was blindly ambitious. So if we break down what the word ambition means, it's a drive and a determination to succeed. But I hadn't taken the time to think, but what is success for me? What does success look like for me? Because success for me might be different to what success looks like for you. And what I suppose what I'm better at now, if we go back to that judgment thing, I think I'm better at holding space for people. I'm better at listening. I'm better at being compassionate. So I've always been very empathetic, but sometimes that empathy has teetered in to a point where I become anxious. Whereas now I think I'm stronger at being compassionate towards people, but still holding boundaries, because I recognize the impact of my behavior when I leave it unchecked, I suppose. So there's a couple of things there. There's greater confidence in knowing who I am. It helps me tell my story and connect with other people. I've found career-wise, my career path has kind of gone in a whole new direction to one I was previously setting as that would be success. Whereas previously I was like, I need to get to a CPO level. That's success. That's where I'm going to go. What I found is actually, whilst that has been on offer, it's not where I think I can do my best work. And so there's an element of making hard choices to turn down brilliant opportunities. But I know that opportunity isn't going to be the biggest thing for me. Actually, there might be something else.
Yeah. So the rationale behind that is, if you know what you actually want, right? And if you know who you are, you say you're a better communicator. Isn't that, is that the logic, the logical steps which you which it follows?
Yeah, and this ties in with I'm going to get his name wrong, Dave Goleman's emotional intelligence model. So the model is a 2x2, as all good models are, of starting with your self-awareness and then moving to being able to regulate yourself, so self-regulation, and then there's social awareness and relationship management. So the idea is, if you start with yourself and you understand your behaviors and how you react and your emotions, and you're able to regulate your emotions, then you can start to look outward and you can start to observe and recognize and read social situations. And then you can use your understanding of yourself to help connect with other people, to help maybe regulate other people or manage interactions. And what that might look like is, if you're in a meeting, and I'll come back to this idea of a stakeholder meeting where maybe they're asking for something, or they're pushing you for something that you don't feel comfortable sort of giving. It could be you're actually feeling, you feel like your heart rate's going, you can feel maybe a flush of anger. Your desire is to get defensive and maybe start protecting your reasons. But rather than doing that, because if we play that out, if I start getting defensive and you're asking me for something, that you might then start getting a bit more aggressive, or you might start getting defensive, and then no one's going anywhere in that conversation. Whereas if we switch it round, I feel that heart rate going, I feel the sort of flush in my cheeks, and I want to be defensive. If I regulate myself by moving into curiosity and start going, okay, I hear what I'm hearing you say is that you want this thing. I don't think I understand fully why it's important to you. Can you help me understand why this is such a pressing need? And you start asking questions and you start really being more compassionate to where they're coming from. And then maybe you can move into, okay, let me explain why this is difficult for me. And maybe we can move to figure out a way of compromising around this. And so it's that idea of, if I understand myself and if I'm really self-aware and I know what my behaviors are, and perhaps know when my behaviors can slip into perhaps not the best behaviors, then I am also aware of how I can pull it back and how I can maybe invite somebody else in to work better with me.
Interesting. So we, like last week, I just had a similar situation when I had Marty Kagan, and like one situation was especially important for me. He said, like, you need to win the hearts and minds of your peers as a product manager. And like, I was really like, it struck me, because it's not something, like process product discovery. It's not something, like delivery or something. It's really a soft skill. And it's what you actually describe, right? So better communication, being able to fulfill your job better, right? That's really like what's the goal with that task and skills, right? Take me through a process, how you actually do that. You told me, like when we sat down earlier, you told me, okay, you have a process, you do that, like you help other people. Talk me through that process, how something like that looks like, how you help people, getting better in this aspect.
Yeah, so my starting point is always, I need to understand the individual. It's when we talk about sort of personal development and we think about, oh, I need to go and learn this framework or I need to learn this skill, when it comes to really what we're talking about, it's so individual. Everyone's rocked up at this office, and whilst we all might physically be in the same space, the paths that have brought us there are all totally different. So I typically always start with, tell me your story, your life story. What are the things that have happened in your life, the highlights or the lowlights, and both usually, that have brought you to this point and have really turned you into the person you are today? And then I ask them to see if they notice any themes along those paths, anything that stands out to them. And then I usually go into a lot of questions around, okay, let's try and drill down on what we think your values might be. So for me, when I go through my life story, I notice a couple of elements pop up. I notice that I'm happiest when I'm doing things for others, that I like to be kind and I like to be generous and I'm empathetic, and there are all these words that pop up. And what I boiled it down to was generosity. I like generosity for me is a value, and generosity shows up in behavior. So if we start with the value, that might seem like a sort of abstract concept, but how does that show up in my day to day? So my generosity value means that I can sit and I can generously listen to someone. I can generously give my time. There's a flip side to every behavior, which means that it might sound like I'm being, oh, well, aren't I a nice person because I'm so generous? But there's bad behaviors that can be associated with that generosity. That generosity sometimes means that I flip into rescuer mode and I'm going in feeling like I've got to solve everybody's problems. Or it might be that I can tip into, and dare I say, maybe a bit controlling of, I'm going to give you this gift and now I'm going to tell you how I expect you to take this gift, which is not generous.
Mm-hmm.
So it's being aware of the sort of flip side. Now, another value that I identified when I look across my life is I love being high energy, and I love bringing energy and enthusiasm, and be that sort of being physically active. I always used to dance when I was younger. And still today, if you see me at a wedding, I'm first on the dance floor. And it's encapsulated with the word I use, which is zest. Like, I feel like zest is a key value. So for me, I know I need to be living into that by having exercise. I go and take a walk every day. When I have a conversation like this, I know I get very excited. That's a behavior that sort of naturally shows out. Again, the flip side of that is I need to know when to calm down, not dominate conversation. That might be another part of it. It's sort of picking up on these behaviors that can be both really positive and sometimes can be a bit negative.
Interesting. By the way, I saw a lot of hearts flying here. So if people comment,
I can't see them. I can't see the comments.
Yeah, so if people press like or something like that, you can see it in the live stream. And it was, like at the moment when you spoke about the generosity. Yeah. So, but help me. Yeah. So, like, you're product manager, you're product leader. First thing you do when you come into a company, you sit down with each and every individual and speak about their life for an hour or two, or how long does that take? And where do you start? Do you really like go step by step through? I mean, like, I imagine just a situation if you come in there and you need to be, you need to establish somehow a trust relationship to have a deep conversation, and how do you do that?
Yeah, and I think it's always worth saying that I'm never going to push someone to talk about something they don't want to talk about. It is totally up to them. I mean, what I always do is I always share a very sort of shortened version of my life story. I'm very open about some of the challenges I've faced, and really that I get it. I've also been a product manager, so it's not like
Mm,
I don't understand the pressures. I totally get it. I've been,
mm,
I mean, I did a well, I suppose it's a competitor, I shouldn't say, a product tank talk many years
mm.
ago,
No problem. Yeah.
and sort of reference crying in the toilets
Mm,
because sometimes there were just days where it was just all too much. So I've
mm,
been there, so I
mm,
can be totally empathetic with that.
mm, mm,
Um, I think it's recognizing where nobody wants to rock up and do a rubbish job at work. So
mm,
recognizing this is a vulnerable position for them, but also sort of
mm,
helping them understand that I am here to help if you would like me to help. So there's always a process. For some people, they come in and they're just more than happy, lay it all on the table, and we get stuck in. For some, it takes a little bit more time,
mm,
and I'll alter the direction we go. And for some people, it's really uncomfortable talking about values. And some people have had really challenging things happen in their lives that they are not
mm,
prepared to talk about at work, which is
mm,
totally fine. So it's about, okay, if you don't want to talk about that stuff, what else? What other themes have you seen in your career? Let's keep it to work. What else do you see? What are the patterns? When are you
mm,
happiest
mm,
at work?
mm,
So yeah,
mm,
I go in with one-to-one with everyone to try and understand each individual.
mm,
It plays then into the team dynamic because
mm.
we tell ourselves stories. And I mean, how many times have you perhaps in earlier on in your career said things
Mm,
about senior leadership where you're like,
mm,
oh, they're
mm,
useless and they're rubbish, and you can easily just throw a load of insults
mm,
at them.
mm,
When
mm,
you sit with that leader, you suddenly get a whole view of what they're having to deal with,
mm,
and what
mm,
you're able to do then is start to sort of pull people together and recognize, actually, we've all got our shit to deal with. We're all
mm,
coming to
mm,
this
mm,
with a bag of stuff that we're carrying around. And so,
mm,
how can we be a little bit more empathetic and recognize that the work we're doing, we're going to come up against these challenges? How do we make it a safe space? How do we change some of our language and recognize how our behaviors might be impacting other people? And so, yeah, I do take a very personal approach. That does take time, but when it
mm.
starts moving, then you can pull that into everything, every aspect of product.
What is the more important aspect for you there? Is it more important that the other person understands more about themselves, or is it more that you as a leader understand the person and can, steer the tasks or, steer something in their position? Like which aspect of these two, you understanding as a product leader
Yeah,
the employee, or the employee understanding him or herself better? Like what is actually the goal of this conversation, so to say?
I think it's everyone understanding themselves better, because if you're a product leader, you need to know
Mm,
yourself better than anybody else. Like, I think sometimes if you're in a
mm,
leadership position, you're thinking about how you're changing other people, but actually you've got to also be recognizing your own change. So
mm.
I want to give an example. I'm trying to think about one that would be really
Yeah,
useful
that
here.
would be awesome.
Um,
Yeah.
if we think about players in a team, so you've got your leader, you've got the team itself, and everyone's carrying around these values, these things that these habits and behaviors they default to. I'm gonna use an example of a team I've worked with before,
Yeah,
and
perfect. Example is always good. Yeah,
and
maybe you can share a little bit your
and
war story or something like that. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
the values of one individual who is who is an exceptional product person. Her values were around excellence. So that excellence showed up in her practice. She's incredibly diligent. She does excellent work. And she realized that she wasn't being able to communicate very well with another team, with the stakeholder team,
Mm,
and found
mm,
that they were a bit dismissive, or they were a bit reluctant to help. And we dug in to the example she was using, and she was able to reveal that in her communication, she packs everything with data, which is great. This is what we talk about all the time, right? We want to be data driven. But what we kind of uncovered was she was using data almost like a weapon in conversation. So someone would object to something she was proposing, and she would fire back the data as to why she was right. Now, if you're on the receiving end of that, that doesn't feel great, does it? That puts you in that defensive. I'm going to shut down. I don't know where do I go from here. And so we realized her excellence was, well, she is an excellent product person if she's a bit more self-aware around how that plays into her communication. She can soften it a little bit, not compromise on excellence, but again, invite someone in to join her in that behavior, rather than push, I'm right, you're wrong, this is why I'm right, because I'm excellent at what I do. Similarly, so on this same individual was struggling to see how the product leader was going about what they were doing, because it was a different way to how she would do it. When I worked with the product leader, I knew she was hitting up against all these other problems, but she didn't want to reveal that to the whole team, because you, as a leader, you've got to be really careful about what you communicate and what you don't, and there's diplomacy and all that kind of things that are going into play. But what she recognized in her values, she's not a feelings person. She's much more analytical, and she just wants to get in and get a job done. And whilst you'd think those two might meet in terms of, oh, excellence and analytics and all this is going to work perfectly, actually it just missed. But it missed in such a way that both sides couldn't appreciate where the other was coming from. So in doing that self-awareness thing, if you become aware that you might have a habit of forgetting how somebody else might feel, you can then catch yourself and then bring it together with, okay, I'm doing that thing. Or you can say to your team, I recognize this is one of my behaviors. I am giving you permission to call it out if you feel I am demonstrating that and it's not helping the team. And you're starting to give tools and language to each other to use safely. So this is the challenge, right? The whole team has to be on board, and it has to feel like there's trust. That's the biggest challenge, is creating trust. But if I can work with everybody, then usually I can help get them to buy in to creating that space and sort of bringing that self-awareness, and therefore bringing that vulnerability to be able to share where we're all at. Does that make sense? I recognize I went on quite a long explanation of that, but I don't want to lose you.
No, super interesting. I mean, like in the product masterclass, we help product manager get better, right? And one of the most, requested, like when we ask people, okay, what do you want to achieve, right, before the product masterclass, they're always like, the stakeholder management is at number one. They always say, like, okay, stakeholder management, this is my challenge, right? It's that's really, and I don't know, maybe whoever listens, maybe you can confirm that in the comments or ask questions about that. But I think this is really an important point. And I think moving up the ladder, being a product leader, it's the same thing, right? Just on another level, because you deal with, I don't know, sales and marketing, and just on different similar situation on a different level, right? What would you suggest those people how to get better? Is there anything you can do yourself? Is there frameworks? Is there a self-assessment? How do you get better in this stuff?
Okay, there's a lot you can do. If we start with the holder thing, and again, I've been having a lot of conversations around confidence lately, and the stakeholder piece comes up time and time again. Fundamentally, we need to build relationships with people in order to feel a sense of trust, in order to feel a sense of confidence in being vulnerable. So the first thing I would say is, are you actively working on those relationships? Working on a relationship does not mean going and asking for something. It's about building the relationship with that individual and cultivating a relationship where you could sit and have a coffee with them and not talk about product at all, and actually just have a chat and feel like, I mean, I'm not saying you have to be best friends. It's just more about, can you cultivate a relationship where you understand who each other is on some level? So that would be the first thing, is investing time in relationships. Then when it comes to all the stuff I'm talking about knowing yourself, I think there are tons of resources. I think exercises like the one I talked about looking over your life and thinking about the key highlights and the lowlights, and can you start noticing any themes along there? Asking yourself questions around, who am I when I'm at my best? What does that look like? What would somebody else say about me? Who do I admire? What values in other people do I admire? Because that's gonna show that there's something in that you place value in. There's also another exercise around imagining the person you want to be in the life you want to have, and then thinking, what would that person do day to day? So if I want to be super confident and let's just use exercise as an example. I want to be, I think about somebody who's really physically fit. What does that person do? Well, they probably do some sort of exercise every day. They probably move more. So what can I do? Well, I can start moving more. I can go out for a walk first thing in the morning, and you start making choices based off that. So there are things like that. There are, you're going to laugh because I'm going to reach for the book, but Thomas can also reach for the book.
Yeah,
so I'm a massive Brené Brown fan. I first came across her on Netflix. She does a Netflix documentary called Call to Courage, I think it was. That's the first time I came across her. She's written loads of books, but this one, Dare to Lead, really helped my understanding in a leadership sense. And then she has a podcast called Dare to Lead, and she has interviewed so many fascinating people, usually who are academics, and they are going into various different ideas of psychology or sociology and science and data and all these sorts of things that have then led me on other paths. So in her book Dare to Lead, she sort of takes you through a values exercise. There are plenty of other types of value exercises out there, but that's just the one I kind of is my go-to. So you can do that. This is another book recommendation. I'm not necessarily, it's a big one, called Path Through the Jungle by Professor Stephen Peters, which really goes into the neuroscience and the sort of cognitive behavioral science around you and your behavior, and digs in. He's the person who came up with the chimp paradox. There's tons, but I think if you don't want to purchase anything and you don't want to pay for a coach, I think the first thing you can do is have a look at your life. Where have you been your happiest? When do you feel that you're most confident? What are those environments? Think about your work. When have you been happiest in your career? What does that look like? What are the things? Who are the people you've been working with? What's that enabled you to do? You can just do a lot of self-reflection to understand the things you care about, and if there are themes in that, and that's usually a good starting point.
Wonderful. I mean, like everybody can do that. Help me, what's the next step? Like you identify your own values. What's important for you? Yeah. And what's the next step then? Like how do you transition that, or how do you bring that into work, right? So I ask myself, if I would find out generosity, because that's your example, would be the theme, right? How do I bring that into my work life so that I'll leverage my abilities as a product manager? But it seems a
And
little
this
bit
is,
unattached for me. Yeah.
yeah, so this is where I'd start to say in the coaching journey, what are your goals at work? Like, what are your career goals? And
Mm,
understanding where you're wanting to get to. And then I try and pull in those values in how to get to those goals. So for for an example, one product manager I worked with looking to try and get to senior product manager, and they recognized they wanted to build their muscle in data. And I can't remember off the top of my head what the other area of development they were keen to work on was. But one of her values was community. So we looked at ways about how can you raise your profile and learn and sort of learn and cultivate more knowledge around data through your community value of working with people together.
mm,
So
mm,
she then reached out, started looking at how could we do demos or invite somebody from the data team to come and share some learnings in a group on, can I go to a meetup that's going to talk about this, and recognize how she learns best, how she feels enthusiastic about this topic, and use those values as
mm,
such. Um, Similarly, I'm trying to wrap my brain for another example. But if I'm using myself, then it's, if my goal is around, well, currently I'm looking at how do I build my business of coaching consulting. What I I've got a story there about who I am and what I'm about. And
mm,
if I'm true to those values and how I go about it, I'm gonna attract and sort of build very authentically a business that is going to be fulfilling to me, because I
mm,
could easily go and just say I'm just going to train people in how to do I don't know, discovery, but
mm,
I don't think I'd find that as fulfilling as how do I help people build their confidence and create great connections and be collaborative through this generosity that of listening and taking time to get to know
mm.
somebody. So it's really identifying the goal and then tying ways of achieving that goal that are in line with your values.
So you try to wave it into your work and see where you can actually bring in the values that everybody benefits from it, like company, customers, and your peers, right? Wave it in.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Mm,
Because ultimately, if you can fulfill your values at work, even if you're in an environment where you're like, but really,
mm,
I'm doing this job to pay the bills, and I happen to be decent at this.
mm,
Where I would really like to be is on a ski slope,
mm.
and that's not really going to tie in very well.
Yeah.
But what
Mm,
can you do? Well, maybe it's around, you know, how do I bring that enthusiasm? How do I connect with other people who might like skiing, for example? How
mm,
do I create
mm, mm,
spaces at work that mean that for me coming to work it feels happy and fulfilling in some way.
mm. So how do you, the first conversation with the people is the starting point, but how do you support people, on their, I guess it's a journey, and it might take quite some time, like of reflection and, like ongoing work, so to say. How do you do that? Like what's your process or your best practices to help people with this challenges?
Well, I suppose because it's very uh, coaching led. It's really what typically would happen is once we've really understood their values and their goals, and we've plotted out ways of getting there, and we're into more of the day-to-day. There is always stuff that's going to throw up, that's going to be thrown up, that they don't know how to navigate. So I've just come out of a really awful meeting. I don't know, I'm feeling all these feelings. I'm really frustrated. I don't know how to communicate this thing. I've got a strategy deck to do. It can be anything. But if we boil it back down, it then comes back down to, right, what is the story you're trying to tell? What is the objective you're trying to work towards? How can we find ways, or how can you find ways, more to the point, that feel right for you? So then it really moves more into a coaching relationship. But because I've understood the individual, when certain things come up, it's like, okay, well, where have we noticed this behavior before? Okay, you felt like that because in a previous experience with a previous boss, and whilst this boss might not be as bad as the old one, they're demonstrating some behaviors that for you is starting to get you angry. And then let's go back. What are your behaviors? What can you do that might change this? So it then really turns into just sort of more of a classic coaching model. But again, because of my experience in product management, I can really empathize with a lot of, and sort of help navigate. And that's where it becomes like coaching, mentoring. Okay, well, bear in mind that an exec might care about this. Well, you might not see it like that. We need to craft a story that's impactful, and that sort of thing. It kind of goes into that more classic product coaching, I suppose.
When you're in a product management leadership role, right? So you coach people, and like, I think this is awesome, right? That's how you bring the best out of people. But I guess like you have like the two sides, right? The self-development, right? The discover yourself, and the product discovery, and like all these processes and methods, right? So how much time do you allocate, like just roughly give me an impression? Okay, is this 50-50, or is develop the human side and the self-development and the self-discovery, is it more or less, or like give me an impression how how that's weighted?
That's really hard. So I think I'd say the first section of any relationship, any coaching relationship, or when I'm in a leadership role, will always be getting to know that individual. And then the two are just so intertwined. I mean, if I'm thinking about someone totally new to product, or it's their first product role, and maybe they haven't had any sort of formal mentoring, and I've come in as the CPO, product director, whatever it might be, I suppose I'd want to make sure it's if, depending on their skill, it's probably going to be more weighted to what we traditionally call the hard skills, but only once I've understood the individual, because I'll be able to better connect with that person. If I understand who they are and what they care about, I'll also be able to translate some of the concepts and the methods into language that they might connect with more, and use analogies that they will resonate with. So always start with the person, and then go into the sort of education piece around product. And then as we go and they're trying those things out, then it's kind of together. So say I was teaching you about product discovery. I'd get to know, but I'm with you on the long term. I'd get to know you first. Then I'd teach you some principles and maybe some product discovery methods, and you would try those, and then you'd come back to me, and then you might say, I was doing this customer interview and they weren't giving me the information I wanted, and now I think I'm rubbish, and I'm not going to do it again. And I'd be able to go, okay, first of all, let's talk through what you did. I'll be able to give sort of helpful advice on how to do a better customer interview, perhaps. But I'd also be able to say, this isn't a reflection on your worth. This is about learning. And we've talked about learning before. Maybe you've struggled with perfectionism in the past. And so we need to recognize that failure is okay. This is all helping us grow. This is moving into that growth mindset we talked about before. So it kind of then merges together, and the two become intertwined.
Yeah. So first, build the connection, the relationship, and then go more to the hard facts. That's what I took from it. We only have 10 minutes left. So if you guys have a question listening, please just, type it into the comments. Otherwise, I will just go on because I have still a lot of questions in my head. I want to read one section from this book here, a really short one. Yeah. In the past, shops were about muscles. Now they are about brains, but in the future, they will be about the heart.
Mm.
What do you think
I
about
didn't
that?
write it.
You didn't write it. Yeah. But I mean, I thought, you gave me that book and I read it, and I said, and I thought, okay, but this is actually, brains and hearts, and I could immediately emphasize with that, right? Like in the past, we worked with muscles, yeah, and now seems to me like you're saying, okay, brains, hearts, and the human connection is more important than learning the hard skills. It's like if I summarize that, right? And actually, like when we first, talked like 2 weeks ago, it actually struck me a bit because I thought, okay, I was really on the other side, right? So the techniques and methods and yeah.
Yeah, I think, what do I think about it? Well, we are making more informed decisions when we are purchasing things these days, and I think we care more about we certainly care more about the environment, for example, and perhaps ethics behind some of the things we choose to purchase. And so how companies connect with us, how products position themselves and connect with us does become important. But I think it's also worth saying not everyone's there, right? I mean, we've worked in organizations where that culture isn't there. And I think that's something I am nervous of, especially with the whole sort of AI isn't new, but the sort of the ubiquitousness of AI, or how it's getting that way. Sorry, terrible English from me. Is if we aren't putting our hearts and minds into the development of this software, we are going to lose that in the connection. I mean, there's a brilliant book around women. Oh, what's it called? It's the data gap. Women in the data gap. I can't remember it. Oh, sorry. It's about how gender difference has caused this whole gap in how products are built. Oh, I've just created some fireworks for myself. I'm not celebrating that, by the
way. I know, like usually like that, the firework comes out.
Yeah. And it talks about how if you have all the same sort of people in a room developing a product, they are developing that product for people who look and feel and act like they do. When we start, thank you, Invisible Women, thank you. I've just seen someone add in what it's called. Exactly, when we start thinking, thank you, Sandra. When we think about that hearts and minds connection, it goes beyond gender and race. We become more self-aware of maybe the prejudices we hold and the privileges we come in with, and we can connect with people who don't look and sound like us, and we can hold space, and we can sort of build these relationships. And I really hope that as we see more trusting, safe spaces that harbor belonging, diversity, equity, inclusion can succeed, and therefore we will see those heart-built products come into the fold. Sorry, I'll get off my soapbox, but that's how I feel about that one.
And here we have the author too, Caroline Criado
Perez. Yeah, thank you.
Clear is kind, unclear is unkind.
Yeah.
What's the meaning for you there? You told me that's like your one of your favorite quote in the other book. Like, what does that mean to you? Is it like, okay, be honest and open to help others? Is that what it means for you?
Yeah. So this is another bit. I mean, in the book, it's in big words in the book, and she says, clear is kind, unclear is unkind. And the reason that resonated for me was because it talks about niceness and how you can go into an organization, it might feel nice, but it also means they're not having difficult conversations. And I've learned from other reading around difficult conversations and how that is so key to real progress and development and performance. The clear is kind as a leader and as a manager is what I often have to remind myself when I'm about to give some really difficult feedback, which is, if I am not open and honest with you, and if I don't give you that feedback, if I don't give you the chance to be better and make improvements in the areas that you are being judged on, then that isn't kind. That is me getting out of something.
Yeah.
It will be difficult, but it will be ultimately for the best if everybody knows where they stand, because there's nothing worse than and again, this was another conversation I had last week with someone I coach, which was, I've spent a year talking to my manager about where I want to get to, that I want a promotion next year, and they've been telling me I've been doing all the right things. Then it got to the performance review stage and they said, I'm not putting you forward for promotion because you didn't do this thing. And the person I'm working with saying, they never said this to me before. They've never given me any notice of this before it's too late. Whereas if we're being kind, if we're putting people's interests, their own personal development interests first, then we can equip them, and then that will also equip us, because then if they're able to step up, then great. If they're not, then everyone knows what the expectations were. And I think this expectation thing is a big one. Managing expectations, managing each other's expectations and your own expectations. So yes.
Before I did the product masterclass, I was running a lot of entrepreneurship programs, right? And you have a lot of teams with a lot of ideas. And I noticed that at the end of the day, the teams who had the best performance were always the ones who were radically honest with each other. Yeah. But you need a second component. Yeah. They often had great humor in the team, because honesty, sometimes needs a humor side to, bring it over the lips and, I don't know, discuss it openly.
Yeah, absolutely. It's got to feel like we're tackling a problem that we're putting on the table rather than a problem I have with you. It's got to be, let's put this here. You can always say, this feels a bit awkward because I want to talk about this thing and I don't know how to go about it. There are loads of techniques, but ultimately, yes, coming with humor, kindness, honesty. I think you're absolutely right. That I think humor is absolutely key.
Pippa, where can people reach you if they listen to you and want to connect and have further question or something like that?
Connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm always on there. I have been trying to build a website. It's on my to-do list, but it's one of those things that just keeps getting pushed down.
LinkedIn page is the new website.
It's coming. It's coming. I just am terrible at prioritizing some of the things I need to do, clearly. But yes, please contact me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy for new connections.
Yeah. And I have an announcement as well. We are running our conference this year again, Just Product Code, and it's totally free to join in the live stream. It is on 11th of October. One of our first speaker we signed up is Ryan Singer. He built a new framework for creating software, building software. And yeah, check it out. The website is Just Product Conference. And beside that, yeah, feel free to follow us on LinkedIn, YouTube, or the Product Masterclass to have enjoy other discussions or other sessions like with Pippa today. Yeah, Pippa, thank you very much. It was really super interesting, and the last words are for you.
Well, I love chatting about this stuff. I think it's hard. Sometimes it feels really uncomfortable, but I think anything you can do to raise your self-awareness, to really live into your values, you'll reap the rewards. And just thank you for everybody joining. Please connect. It's be lovely to hear what you thought.
All right. Thank you. That was the last words for today. Bye bye. Enjoy, Pippa. See you.
Thanks, Thomas. You very much. Take care. Bye bye.